And in some big news, the United Nations has released a report projecting India's population to reach 1.46 billion in 2025, making it the world's most populous nation. However, despite the rise in numbers, the report also flags a critical demographic shift, with India's fertility rates dropping to 1.9, far below the replacement level of fertility at 2.1 births per woman. The nation's population is thus expected to grow to a staggering 1.7 billion people in the next 40 years before it begins to fall. The UNFPA report notes that while India has made significant progress in lowering fertility rate, deep inequalities persist across states, castes and incomes. States like Bihar, Jharkhand and Uttar Pradesh continue to report high fertility rates, while urbanized states like Delhi and Kerala have seen birth rates falling. Let's take a look at some of these findings before we take this forward with Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, Dr. PSV Rao, consultant with us. I also have with me Mitali Nikore, economist, and Joyita Basu, editorial editor of the Sunday Guardian with us. So, firstly, the first part of the report talks about how India is the most populous nation in the world with nearly 1.5 billion people, and this number is expected to grow to 1.7 billion in the next 40 years before it starts falling. We can just keep this on our screens as we speak to our guests. Sharad, let me bring you in on this point. From an economics point of view, when we talk about being the most populous country in the world, what does that mean? What are the pros and the cons that the government now needs to keep in mind when developing policies for us over the next 4 decades?
Good afternoon or good evening, Devika. Good evening to my fellow panelists and Newsx viewers. I think we need to keep in mind a few factors. One of the factors is that, the women's participation in the total labor force, they are 50% of our population, almost 50%, if not 50%. The women participation is low, it's about 25-30%, maybe 30, some statistics say 31 to 32%. So we need to increase women's participation, that's one. But when it comes to fertility rate, it is directly related to the literacy of the state, which is why you see Delhi and Kerala, going low on fertility rate, whereas UP, Bihar, these areas where the literacy is still not as well spread as compared to other states, you find that it is higher there. So there is some kind of connection, which is a general economic and demographic principle, that literacy has got a lot to do with family planning and how many children you want to have. You want to look at your economic status and then decide on the family. When you find that you'll not be able to bring up your children in a manner that they are able to make something out of their career, you would rather not give birth to them. So that, I think those are the principles on which family planning and population is based on. However, we've still got, first of all, I would like to point out here that we have not done a census for a very, very long time. So any estimate being made, if we say that fertility rate has dropped down to 1.9, well, another statistical survey could probably give a different result. But assuming this to be true, yes, it is a matter of concern. We saw China when China had launched one-child policy many years ago. It regretted later and it had to go back. Today, China is struggling with, look at what is happening to South Korea. Look at what is happening to Japan. They are struggling. A lot of countries in Europe, they are struggling. There isn't enough workforce in the country. So from an economic point of view, I think at least for some more years, we are fine. Although based on certain castes, I would not like to sound, racist here or naming a caste. But certain castes, you find that the fertility rate is very high. Whereas in certain other castes, it's low. So on an average, 1.9, yes, is alarming. We should technically be equivalent to the replacement rate. We still got few years, probably another 40 years, we'll be hitting our peak, which is when it will start declining. But I'm sure before that, the government should start an education campaign on a very selective basis, especially in these states, not across the country. But in these states, some kind of awareness campaign should be launched, explaining the people about the consequences of what China, South Korea or Japan has gone through. So people need to understand, along with being literate, they need to be literate enough to understand that what are the downsides of having a very, very small family or not producing children, then what will happen to the economy later on. So that is my opening statement, Devika.
Okay, bringing in Joyita Basu. Joyita, It's a simple principle of economics, also of nature. What goes up goes down. So we are expected to hit our population peak in the next 40 years. But is there something that we can perhaps learn, as Sharad was also pointing out, from countries like China, from countries like Japan, South Korea, which did put rules in place at one point in time to control the population? However, many decades later, they now seem to be struggling, and they are in a panic mode to reverse those same policies.
Yes, Devika, if you look at China in particular, I mean, of course, when you are looking at Japan, the workforce situation is so bad that especially when it comes to a large segment of the population is moving into what is known as the elderly category, and they do not have enough people to take care. You know, caregiving industry, they just there are not enough young people to take care of the elderly. So, as a result of which they are talking in terms of, there is a lot of talk that in terms of that you can take the Indians there, and in terms of caregiving, but then language is a barrier. China is facing a problem because of its one child policy. I mean, it has had such impact, it has got impact even, for example, its military, you know, as it is, they are coming in for a few years, it's conscription over there coming in for a few years. These people, I mean, one of the reasons it is said that, you know, our military, when it comes to actual military war fighting capabilities, ours is better primarily because all of these kids are sons, you know, one child family they are coming from. They have been nurtured in a situation, they have had a very luxurious life, as a result of which they are soft, okay, and a whole lot of these problems that are coming in compared to what we have. But at the same time, do we have the kind of resources, especially is our job market good enough for catering to this huge number of population that we are constantly adding, okay, even though this rate has fallen, but in spite of that we are constantly adding. So yes, I agree that, you see, it's very difficult to strike a balance, but we have to strike a balance. We cannot let it go like that, you know, otherwise we will have riots on the streets, you know. I mean, hordes of young men and women without jobs, not enough opportunities, does not work like that. And you know, as it was mentioned by my previous panelist in terms of women's participation in the labor force, yes, it's extremely important, but I just want to correct a figure over there. Currently, it is 41.3% women's participation in the labor force, but we are nowhere near. This is the figure that was given by the government yesterday. I just attended one press conference yesterday. This is exactly the figure that was given over there. So my data is right up to date. Okay, and apart from that, what we are looking at is also in terms of, so you see, unless and until, when compared to China, this is nothing. China, it is something like 60-65% women's participation rate, and the US also it is a little over 50%. But yes, you have to bring these things in the to the working mainstream, because you see, automatically, until and unless you are bringing them, there is not enough knowledge about it. And you see, but at the same time, we have to take it into account. The minute a lot of women are coming into the workforce, not all of them may be willing to have children, and you see, I mean, willingly they may not go. I mean, earlier, I would say, when we were younger and all, there were two children yes, was a norm, but nowadays it is becoming one child. If you see, I mean, you look around the people you know, and just see the number of families and couples, they have one child. So we are already, so the problem is that it is not just states, certain religious demographies are also producing a lot of children, and there are so many problems that is involved. So what we have to do is that we have to strike a balance, and we are nowhere near striking that balance.
Okay, Mithalini Khore, bringing you into the conversation, this is something that, of course, as Joyita pointed out, we see around ourselves as well. This we don't necessarily need a UN report for this realization that a lot of young couples today who are running double income homes are still deciding to only invest into, say, one child, or perhaps not have children at all. And a lot of that sometimes also stems from the fact that it is just, as people say, extremely expensive to have children. I don't think it's necessarily just about women not wanting to give up a so-called freedom. All of our mothers, I had a working mother, and she's managed to raise 2 children and still have a career. So I don't think it really just boils down to demonizing women and saying that because more women are joining the workforce or more women are wanting to earn an income, therefore they're choosing not to have children and sacrifice freedom. I don't think that that's the case. That could be for some people. But Mithali, I want to understand from you, the government then also perhaps, do you feel, need to take some steps in order to make it an environment that is conducive for young couples who are earning well to be able to afford to have more than one child in a city. Today, the school fees itself for a single child is something that people really have to think about. So there are so many little decisions that are involved in having a child, and I don't think it simply boils down to a fertility rate coming down in a UN report.
No, absolutely, Devika. That's very, very correct. And there are a number of issues that, you just pointed out. The first point I'd like to make is, with respect to women's labor force participation and the care economy. Overall, when we look at it, the life cycle of a woman's labor force participation, and Nicole Associates has done a lot of work on this, we find that childbirth is the point at which we see the maximum dropout of women from the labor force, right? The first child may not always result in complete dropout, but the second child is really when women start to drop out completely from the labor force. Now, what is happening today is pure economics, right? On one side, you have cost of living that's going up. You need to have more and more women stepping into the labor force, not just for economic justice, but today as a means of economic necessity and for middle class and lower middle class households to even survive, particularly in urban areas, right? So you will have women who will have to work. Secondly, you don't have any kind of childcare facilities that are even available. The lack of affordable childcare facilities and the lack of affordable daycare centers creates a situation where a woman has to rely on her parents, mostly her mother or her mother-in-law, and every single category of women that you talk to, ranging from a domestic worker to an informal worker in a factory. I'm in a factory area today and I'm speaking to a lot of women workers over here. All of them are telling us they are reliant on their mothers to actually take care of their children. Right, so this is the second big deterrent. The third big deterrent is really around the fact that you will see a change in aspirations, right? And like you said, the cost of bringing up a child. This affects the upper middle class and even the richer people of the society who say, you know what, I want to invest in having one child because that one child is what I can spend 1 to 2 crores or even 3 crores for their higher education, send them abroad, make them very successful professionals. Obviously, I can't do that for 2 or 3 children. So, there are a number of considerations, but I'd also like to say that, I don't think that this is something to be alarmed by. I don't think that this is something in which we have to ring alarm bells and say, oh, it's going to be 1.9 and that's going to be the end of our population, or start to say that this community versus that community or this caste or this religion is, having more children or not having more children. We are having, certain amount of workforce enter into the labor market every year. Can we make that workforce more productive? Can we reduce the inequalities in the labor market so that those who are marginalized, especially women, but also persons with disabilities, persons, who don't have access to the best skilling and educational resources, we have to make sure that they become more productive for our workforce to go as far as possible. I don't think that at 1.9 there's any reason for alarm bells, because Japan, South Korea, etc. are sitting at 1.2 and 1.1. And they're still having, a sort of situation where younger people are coming into the workforce even now. And what I'd like to conclude with saying is, it's all about gender equality. Why does South Korea or Japan have such a massive problem of low birth rates? It's because men are not pitching in to do childcare. Men are not pitching in to do elder care. There is active discrimination against women in South Korea. Even the Ministry of Women has been abolished in South Korea. So, we really have to, as a society, guard ourselves against that sort of hatred towards women, which we are seeing in countries like South Korea and Japan. Really, our culture of Nari Shakti, our culture of respecting women is what can take us forward, and we can create a society which is far more gender equal. That is the real answer to this problem.
Okay, Dr. PSV Rao, then bringing you into the conversation, sir. Another part of the UN population report, and if we can put out my screen on air for a moment so that I can read out the statistics given here. Dr. PSV Rao, a question was asked on certain barriers to having children and what are the most likely factors. Financial limitations was reported as the biggest barrier to having children, and that's something that I've tried to address with Mitali Nikore, but also other issues such as infertility or difficulty conceiving, barriers to fertility or pregnancy related medical care, and poor health, general health or chronic illnesses is also something that several people have chosen as factors when combined could potentially be 45 to 50% of the answers lie in these aspects of healthcare, general health. So in your assessment, Dr. Rao, what is it that we need to do as society and perhaps as the government as well as the medical fraternity to be able to give access to good quality fertility healthcare to young couples as well, and not make it so costly that only a few can have access to it? Because today, Dr. Rao, let's be honest, most of us have some sort of disease or another, some sort of lifestyle disease impacts everybody today.
Good evening, Devika, and the panelists and all viewers. I hope you can hear me clearly, because
yes,
I couldn't
yes.
hear your question very clearly. Yeah, I think you were emphasizing on the fertility issues of delayed marriage and delayed pregnancy, which
Yes.
follows higher education for women, better job opportunities, etc. They will invariably delay having a child. Now, the problem is that women have a certain number of eggs, then that cycles every month. One egg at least is lost. So what happens is, in men the spermatic count does come down with the age, but they don't have the kind of limit because they are constantly producing sperms into old age. Whereas in women, they are born with a set of number of ova. So they don't keep producing more ova. These mature on a monthly basis, and this is why fertility in women rapidly decreases with age. Secondly, the chances of genetic defects in the children they bear increases the older the woman is. So this is an issue that is very difficult to biologically deal with. Now, if you ask women to marry early and have children early, like it happens with those populations where the birth rate is high, then how do you give these women equal opportunity and equal education? Because once they may get educated, but then if you expect them to be working in the workforce, and we have had people in India, you know who they are, who have talked about work, why 40 hours a week, they want you to work 70 hours a week if possible. So how can a woman bear a child, take care of it, breastfeeding, etc.? Now it is easy, men can help, but there is a limit to how much men can help. Men can't bear a child, men can't breastfeed. So these responsibilities land up solely on the woman. So even if the husband is very cooperative and willing to help, there is certain things that limits the lady's ability to go to work, and you know how the commuting itself is consuming a lot of time. There's a lot of stress. So if you look at it from the lady's point of view, it becomes very difficult for her to manage so many things. She's expected to manage the home, she's expected to manage the child, and then expected to do work So these are the problems that are occurring
Yes.
in managing that. So you can't have, see, when I became a surgeon, when I joined the surgery department 46 years ago, women were having 10 to 12 children each. Now women are struggling to even have one child because they because of education, because of delay in because of professional responsibilities, and the financial problems have already been detailed by Dr. Kohli and by Mithali. So these are all issues that affect your the
Yes.
fertility rate, and we have to worry about if there is too much delay, then there will be a high incidence of birth defects. And you see in US now they are crying about the high rate of autism and various other birth defects. So these are all issues that have to be thought of. And anyway, if you look at it from the environment point of view, then it is anyway good if the population of human beings stabilizes world over, because there is a certain amount of population that the world can sustain, and if we keep going on increasing it, it becomes difficult. And as far as taking care of elders, as the population pyramid gets inverted and there are less young people and more elderly people, I think eventually we will have to have automation to take care, and the reversed pyramid will eventually become a cylinder. It won't be, there will be a stage in an advanced society when the children and the elders are same. But automation and such advances will help us. I am quite aware of the problems of this population inversion. Yes, Devika.
Yes, absolutely. On that note, Sharad, just one last point with you. I just have a minute or so left. Jyota, your thoughts on the same as well. When we then talk about planning for the future as far as stabilizing a population is concerned, how essential is it for the government of the day to look at it from a very holistic point of view and perhaps take, like we've been discussing, lessons from other nations on perhaps where they went wrong, where they panicked, and what were the factors that have resulted in their dramatic decline, so that we are not in that situation. When I say holistic, Jyota, I mean you have to look at providing women and young couples what they need, essentially fixing what they need, so that the environment becomes more conducive for more people to have more than one child, if that's what you want as a government for your nation.
I think government schemes, Devika, which take care of education, child care, health care. I think the more such schemes, because if you feel the pinch of raising the child. In China, I think they gave up, producing children primarily because of the cost of raising a child. So I think if we bring down the cost of raising the child, if government welfare schemes are focused, we have Poshan scheme, nutrition scheme where government takes care. So I think education, health are the two main areas. Apart from that, postnatal care and child care is the answer, Devika. If we want to balance out the two objectives, one objective is to make sure we don't fall any further on fertility rate, and second objective is to make sure that we don't get overpopulated, because we have constantly been implicated now that we become the fourth largest economy, but our per capita income is barely $2,800. We have overtaken Japan. So I think that will be taken care of by a balance where government has to support by way of welfare schemes. Devika.
Absolutely. Jyota, your thoughts on the same?
Well, first of all, again, as have been spoke in the earlier segment as well, you need that balance. But at the same time, you see, I mean, although it is kind of becoming the norm in most educated households, as you said, either we have one child or no child, I think this has to change. And what the government perhaps needs to revive that campaign that used to be there, 2 children per home, per family, And there are certain state governments which are talking about you do not get subsidies, you do not get government jobs if you have more than 2 children. I think some sort of punitive measures also will have to be brought into the conversation and brought into the discourse, primarily because you see the rate at which we are going. Okay, fine, we are calculating in 40 years this may happen, but what if it does not happen and we keep exploding? We do not have that kind of resources, we do not have jobs, we do not want riots on our streets. So, you see that there has to be some kind of government, I mean the threat of a punitive action will have to come in sooner or later.
Okay, all right. I've completely run out of time, but I thank all of our panelists for joining us to take that conversation forward. With that, a very short break.